Welcome. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Urbana-Champaign. My name is Reverend Sally Fritchie, and I am the Associate Minister of this church. I am so glad to be here with you, streaming live from our sanctuary on Green Street this morning. I'm glad, too, to welcome those who are here in our sanctuary, enjoying backstage passes while we continue to get all the pieces in place to fully reopen for hybrid Sundays in the new year. Everyone sharing our space today will remain masked and safely spread out through the sanctuary, and you all watching from home will have to sing twice as loud with our hymns because here we won't be singing along to this morning's music. Though the experience is far from the way things used to be, UUCUC is leaning joyfully into the messy and the new, and I, for one, am endlessly grateful for all the grace and flexibility I continue to see in our community. Our congregation's mission is to build community, seek inspiration, promote justice, and find peace. And that mission remains unshaken by COVID or by any of the other changes we find ourselves facing. We are a church of many theologies, a church that strives to build beloved community in the here and now. The winter solstice will arrive this week, marking the shortest day and the longest night of the year. And this morning's service honors that beat in our annual rhythm. There are many winter celebrations flavored with pagan solstice traditions, holly and evergreens and flames lit in darkness. And today we give the solstice its due, taking time to reflect deeply on light and dark and what the turning of the year can teach us about the balance our world needs. If you want to follow along with a written order of service, you can find that link just below this video on our website. And if you want to chat with your fellow UUCUC members, you can find the live stream chat box on our YouTube page. Remember that because we are live, there is still time to make your own contributions to our shared joys and sorrows later in the service. And to do that, you just email your message to joysandsorrows@uucuc.org. That goes for folks here in the sanctuary as well. You are welcome to get out your phones, on silent please, and find the order of service or submit to Joys and Sorrows during the service. This congregation chooses to begin every Sunday with a formal acknowledgement of the indigenous nations of this land. It's a practice that connects us to our history and to our own responsibilities as stewards and members of a wider community. Wherever you are listening from today, please bring to mind the indigenous peoples and histories of your place. And there will be a moment of silence after the acknowledgement. And in that silence, I invite you to consider how specifically you might amplify the voices or contribute support to Native activists in the coming days. We recognize and acknowledge that we gather today on Indigenous land, taken through deception, coercion, and violence. We acknowledge the continued displacement and oppression of Indigenous communities and lift up Native commitments to survival, identity, and the protection of this world. Thank you. And now, if you have a candle or chalice to light at home, please join us in lighting it now. Lighting these flames when we gather together is an invitation to center ourselves and rest in the warm circle of light we create. As we kindle this flame, we reignite our commitment to the mission of our congregation to build community, seek inspiration, promote justice, and find peace. And now, a winter solstice hymn.
to sing to each other, sister to brother, songs of our mother earth. Children of the earth, autumn soon will breathe her last breath, and quick will her death bear witness to mother's birth. Children of the earth, can you feel the air getting cold as darkness takes hold and sleep covers Mother Earth? Children of the earth, we have come to sit in the darkness, breathe in the silence, think of our Mother Earth.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rose St. Clair, and I'm the coordinator for religious exploration and engagement here at UUCUC. And I'm so excited to be here live in Green Street for the first time. Very glad to be here with all of you. And today I'd like to tell you a story about the changing times we're in, and I've brought along some friends to help me tell you this story today. The story is told that in the beginning, there were two gods who were brothers. And like many brothers, they struggled with each other for ascendance and power. One brother was the king of the forces of life, light, and warmth. He wore a crown made of green oak branches and brought with him all growth and vitality, fertility, and abundance. He was called the Oak King. His brother was the king of the forces of death, cold, and darkness. He wore a crown made of the prickly holly branches and brought with him all withering and decay, stillness and hibernation. He was called the Holly King. The brothers were identical in strength, and so year after year the same pattern was repeated. Each year, the Oak King would grow strong and mighty, and during his time of dominance, the light would gradually increase, bringing with it warmth and abundance. But each year, at the height of his power, he would be thrown down by the Holly King. In the wake of the Holly King's victory, the light would gradually wane, and as it did, cold would come and the land would go dormant. But at the height of the Holly King's power, he would be challenged again by the Oak King and would fall, and the cycle would repeat. Alone, the brothers were equals. But soon there came a race of beings known as people. The people watched this cycle, and pretty soon they began to take sides. The people loved light and warmth, and they feared darkness and cold. And so each year they would celebrate the victory of the Oak King, but they would mourn the victory of the Holly King. When the two struggled with each other, the people would lend the strength of their voices and their bodies, their minds and their spirits to the Oak King, but the Holly King without their support. Over time, the people's adoration of warmth and light only grew, and so they began to invent ever new ways to find light in the darkness and warmth in the cold. And finally, if they wished it, they could spend all of their time in the light they had created, and they could be warm all year long. But their efforts were not without consequences. Generations passed and generations again, and the people did not at first notice the shifts in the balance. But finally, they could ignore it no longer. The people began to notice that darkness was disappearing from the land, driven out by the millions of lights the people had created. All began to suffer the effects of light unbalanced by darkness. But it was not just darkness that was disappearing. Cold began to flee too. The whole world began to get warmer. Summer began sooner and lasted longer. Ice that had been frozen far longer than the longest memory of the oldest person began to melt. Migrating animals began to be confused about when to migrate. Plants found themselves rooted in climates that no longer supported their needs. The air was changing, and the winds that had brought rain and taken it away began to flow in unexpected directions. The people began to see that their support of warmth and light over cold and darkness had altered the balance of the whole world. They began, slowly, to realize that the Holly King was dying. And for the first time, this thought filled them with fear. What would happen if the balance continued to be destroyed? Could they even survive in a world without the Holly King? And in the world of the gods, the Oak King realized it too. And though they had been competitors all these many centuries, he also realized that he loved his brother deeply and could not live without him. The longest night came, and the Oak King and the Holly King met again, but this time the Oak King had no heart for the fight. He came open-handed to his brother, who was struggling to stay on his feet. The Oak King wrapped the Holly King in a tight embrace and laid the great oak crown on his brother. On the night when he usually claimed descendants, the Oak King realized that the world was already too warm and too light. And so, each supporting the other, they went out into the world to see what could be done to restore balance.
Thank you for your storytelling magic, Rose. Each Sunday here at UUCUC, we make space to share the joys and sorrows closest to our hearts. What joys and what sorrows do you carry into our time together today? Let them come to mind, and if you wish me to share them aloud, there's still some time to send them in to joysandsorrows@uucuc.org. Together, we're going to hear our blessing song, Long Time Son, and then I will share aloud the joys and sorrows of this community.
May the long time sun shine upon you. All love surround you, and the pure, pure light that's within you guide your way home. May the long time sun shine upon you. All love surround you, and the pure, pure light that's within you guide your way home. May the long time sun shine upon you. All love surround you, and the pure, pure light that's within you guide your way home.
A Joy from Sally Babbitt. The poinsettia in the sanctuary today is to honor Holtz and her marriage on December 9th, 1967. A Sorrow from Andy Robinson. I share of a minister neighbor going through a tough mental health crisis. Our thoughts go out to help those who help us selflessly. A joy from Jim Hannum. Sandy and I were married on Christmas Eve 49 years ago. What a joy to be married to this woman. From Kyle Croha. My friend Dr. Terry L. Von Thaden's son, Liam, was the victim of random gun violence one Sunday afternoon on Prospect Avenue, with a shot to the head resulting in paralysis and severe pain ever since. He has just been transferred to Chicago for rehab, but his path has had no smooth spots so far, and the pain has been unrelenting. I'm heartbroken for him and his family. May we please uplift him and his family with fiercest energies, prayers, good thoughts, however you so wish to invoke energies, to ask for pain mitigation and peace for whatever outcomes are ahead. From Marilyn Ryan. Concern for my sister-in-law Karen, who received a serious cancer diagnosis this week. Thank you. I will add one more joy for the launch of the James Webb Telescope. For those who follow our space exploration efforts, this is a huge leap forward happening in the coming week for humanity as a whole. We have a chance to see the birth and origins of our own universe. Thank you, each of you who shared, and for anyone who sent a joy or sorrow that did not make it into our inbox in time, know that it will be included in this week's e-news, and know that you are held and loved by this community all the same. I invite you to take a breath, rest your eyes, and join me in holding these joys and sorrows with love and tenderness, with gratitude for all the connections that have brought meaning, joy of anniversaries, and in hope that pain will be alleviated, that diagnoses will be a path toward healing, toward recovery. No matter the joys or sorrows you carry in your heart today, spoken or unspoken, I pray that you feel the love of this community, stretching between us and beyond us and holding us up. Please take these next moments to find your own words, to ask for what you need most, or simply to breathe and rest with this moment of meditation. We, as Unitarian Universalists, acknowledge that our circle of care doesn't stop at our church doors. We are deeply connected to the community we find ourselves in and to the wider world. Please continue to keep an eye on your e-news weekly newsletter for opportunities to show up, to find support, to get involved, and to be part of this community. This Friday, we'll be gathering in person for our Christmas Eve service, right here out on our south lawn. The brief and joyful Lessons and Carols service will be outdoors, complete with candles and singing. The service will begin at 4:15, just before sunset, and you are welcome to show up early for open carol singing starting at 4 to sing through all your favorites as folks arrive and gather together. We hope for a crowd, so consider parking on the street if you can to allow space in our parking lot for those with mobility challenges. Before that Christmas Eve service, there are a few additional church services out in our community this week, led by neighboring churches. On Tuesday, there will be an interfaith prayer event against gun violence in CU, and there will also be 2 Blue Christmas services offered by First Presbyterian and St. Matthew Lutheran. For those who find this holiday season to be a mournful or difficult time. Also coming up today at 1 p.m., anyone with young people in your family who might be interested in coming to church for a winter festivity event. There will be crafts, there will be games, there will be fun to be had 1 p.m. indoors here at church today. And this Monday, we'll have our popcorn theology event, watching Jingle Jangle together online, followed by discussion. I hope that no matter your feelings about this coming holiday, you have a beautiful week and many opportunities for joy and reflection. We'll see you back here next Sunday, the 26th, for an online service centered on gratitude, which will include a blessing from our own Reverend Florence. Each Sunday, in recognition of our very real interdependence and reliance on one another, we pass the plate and share our offering with an organization doing the work of justice in the world. During the month of December, half of our donation goes to the Partner Church Committee, whose mission is to develop long-term mutually supportive relationships with our fellow UUs in Transylvania, Romania, and the Khasi Hills in Northeast India. These non-USA-based UU communities have their own unique and rich histories, and our support and connection helps us keep the many voices of international UUism alive. You can give by text or through the online portal on our website, and half of your donation will go toward the work of this church, half will go to our partner churches. We invite you to give whatever is generous for you, and know that anything you give will be gratefully received and put to use, helping make a real impact on the world. The offering will now be taken. This week will mark the winter solstice, the moment at which the northern hemisphere of our Earth tilts as far away from the sun as it can, giving us the longest night and the shortest day of our year, and then finally begins to swing inevitably back towards spring and summer. This is, in a way, the closest thing we have to a universal holiday, because every living thing in this hemisphere experiences that same long, dark night and that same shift back toward lengthening days. Humans across time and place and culture have observed and celebrated the solstice by lighting flames in the darkness, candles and bonfires and Yule logs. And even religions that do not call themselves earth-centered or pagan continue to mark this seasonal beat with fire and evergreen trees and nods to our deep connection to our shared planet. There is something comforting about the fact that no matter what the headlines are, no matter what is going on in the world, this day will come, the days will lengthen, and there is little we can do to change that. Some solstice traditions place the emphasis on battling against darkness and cold, on bringing back the sun and defeating winter in order to bring on spring. But as our story of the divine brothers Holly King and Oak King tells us, I hope to speak today about balance and the ways we might more fully honor and appreciate the dark alongside the light on this longest night of the year. A book written by Barbara Brown Taylor, an Episcopal priest and professor of religion, called Learning to Walk in the Dark, includes many stories of exploring the power and spiritual meaning of darkness. In one that I'll share here, she travels with a group into a cave deep underground in order to meditate in complete pitch black. As she arrives at the rocky underground ledge where she intends to sit in reflection, her flashlight beam catches on a dazzlingly beautiful vein of crystals in the cave wall. It takes her breath away, and she bends to pick up a tiny shard that had broken off and lay on the ground. She stares at the rock chip, imagining herself shrunk down and walking into the seam of sparkling stone with a crystalline ceiling above and a crystalline floor below. Before turning off her flashlight to begin her meditation, she tucks the tiny treasure into her pocket. And the next day, as she shakes out her hiking clothes, the stone falls out onto the floor. And she almost doesn't recognize it. In the light of her bedroom, it looks gray and plain. Pigeon-colored, she says. Unremarkable. It's only when she turns out the lamp and shines a small penlight at the shard that she recaptures some small part of the beauty she remembers from the cave. With the light back on, the stone returns to its washed out and plain appearance, the kind of rock that could be tossed onto a gravel driveway and never get a second glance. She writes, "How many other treasures have I walked right by in the light of day without realizing their beauty?" Darkness is a concept that slips easily into metaphor, and our society loves to pit darkness and light against each other, as if they are part of some cosmic battle between good and evil, as if they are opposing forces, a binary, instead of brothers whose contrast is what gives each other shape. When someone says we live in dark times, we know they mean that times are difficult, hopeless. And when someone says, hey, look on the bright side, we know they're trying to cheer us up. That which is good and hopeful and true is associated with light. That which is grim and evil and tragic is associated with the dark. It's such a long-standing binary that it makes me hesitate to use darkness as metaphor at all, ever. Because, among other reasons, associating darkness, including dark skin, dark hair, dark eyes, with bad or frightening characters has a deep and violent history. So let us do our best not to turn the darkness of this longest night into metaphor at all, but let it simply be. Let it be what it is. Night is the balancing half of every day. The midnight world that stretches out beyond the ring of our comfortable firelight can be at once familiar and frightening, routine and mysterious. Nighttime is when we try and find rest, peace, stillness. We do not sleep in brightly lit rooms. Night is when we draw closer together, slow down, settle into ourselves. Last Sunday, our beloved Reverend Florence spoke about wintering, about honoring even the cold seasons of life, not just the abundant summers. And this wisdom should continue to ring true as we reckon with the balance of light and dark throughout our year. Daylight is for getting things done, for movement, for striving onward and upward. But the dark stillness of holy night invites us to see that which is smaller and more subtle. It urges us to stop and carefully observe the glittering shard of gravel that we would otherwise pass by. Allows us to listen for that still small voice that might guide us forward. Whether that voice is God or simply our own deepest truths. Like the stars, distant and shining unwavering day and night, but they can only be seen once darkness falls. These deep spiritual truths require a willingness to venture outside the firelight and look up into the unknown. And I want to be clear that yes, there is intellectual and metaphorical weight behind this call to embrace and appreciate the shadow, but I am also speaking quite literally. When was the last time you let yourself simply be in darkness? Not when you're trying to fall asleep, but when you are fully awake, alert, observing what the dark has to teach you. It's all very well to imagine what it is like to step outside and look up at the night sky, or sit in a darkened room and light a single candle. But the earth-centered traditions that give life to this holiday are traditions of embodied practice, of physical presence and lived experience. If we were able to all be together today for a truly pagan celebration of Solstice, we would be standing in a circle, lighting a shared flame, raising cups of spiced cider and sweet sun cakes in a toast to the light and the dark and the turning of the wheel. We would be reaching out to touch the earth, to touch a tree root, to touch each other's hands. So this is my invitation and encouragement to you. Sometime in the coming days, or rather in the coming nights, put on your coat and hat and step out fully into the world of the Holly King. Let yourself be embraced by the quiet and holy dark of this season without fighting back with a porch light or a phone. If you can't go outside into nature, consider instead sitting in your own kitchen or living room, usually the domain of bright daytime busyness, and breathe a few moments in darkness. Light a small candle, if you like, to honor the balance, the flickering dance between light and dark, in which both have a place of honor. And if you're skeptical, or if you already know, what it'll be like to sit in the dark in your own kitchen, I urge you to try it anyway. What's the harm? You might be surprised at how making space for darkness allows the plain and unremarkable stuff in our lives to shine in ways we might otherwise never notice. This time of year is celebrated everywhere with lights and music and gifts. It's good to celebrate. It's good to be loud and joyful. generous and shining. But may this solstice also teach us balance. May it help us when we feel ourselves becoming preoccupied with the kind of frantic busyness and performative merriment that can creep into our celebrations this season. Darkness and light are not locked in eternal battle. They exist together in balance. We do not need to fear the night, the unknown, the mystery. It will give birth to wondrous things. It will allow us to witness miracles if we can but accept its gifts of quiet, of stillness, of rest, and make room in our hearts for its wisdom. May it be so. Amen.
Dark of winter, soft and still, your quiet calm surrounds me. Let my thoughts go where they will, ease my mind profoundly. And then my soul will sing a song, a blessed song of love eternal. Gentle darkness, soft and still, bring your quiet to me. Darkness, soothe my weary eyes, that I may see more clearly. When my heart with sorrow cries, comfort and caress me. And then my soul will hear a voice, a still, small voice of love eternal. Darkness, when my fears arise, let your peace flow through me.
Beautiful. Thank you, Benjamin and Juan. As we prepare to close our time together, let me remind those here in the sanctuary that we'll be doing our best not to linger indoors, but we'll exit as soon as the postlude ends for fellowship and conversation out on the South Lawn. And let me remind everyone watching at home that you are welcome to hop in your vehicle and stop by yourself if you want to say hello in person after the service, or you can enjoy our Zoom fellowship hour as usual. With that, let us extinguish our chalice flame with these words which have accompanied us through these many, many months, written by UU minister Reverend Elizabeth Selly Jones. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.